We find ourselves before Purim. And therefore, let's take some time to review some concepts about Purim and about the Megillah. The festival, the holiday of Purim, is a very significant holiday. It's not to be dismissed as some kind of Jewish Mardi Gras, where you just get dressed up and you have a party and it's just a party day. Yes, there is a lot of enjoyment and celebration on Purim, but it's not, God forbid, it's not a Mardi Gras.
And there's no Ash Wednesday tomorrow.
No, it's a very serious day. We're seriously joyous.
Seriously joyous.
We're seriously joyous. But it's an important day. To some respects, the Zohar says it's more important than Yom Kippur.
Really?
Wow.
Yom Kippur in the Torah is referred to as Yom HaKippurim. Yom HaKippurim literally means the Day of Atonement, but it also could mean the day like Purim. So if it's a day like Purim, Purim is the day which is really on the pedestal, and Yom HaKippurim is a day like Purim. So what is Purim all about? Let's first begin with the action points of Purim, before we get to understanding what Purim is all about. The action points of Purim, which we'll review at the very end as well. The action points are: we are to hear the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, both on the night of Purim and the day of Purim. So this year it's on Saturday night, Sunday. So Saturday night we hear the Megillah, and again on Sunday, sometime during the day, we should hear the Megillah. We are to give Mishloach Manot, gifts of food, at least 2 different types of food, to at least one person, 2 different types of food. Matanot Levyonim, gifts to the poor. And a Su'udat Purim, a celebration of Purim, a Purim feast that begins sometime before sundown on the day of Purim. So sometime on Sunday before sundown we begin the feast, and it continues onwards. We are to say L'chayims, we are to be joyous. It's a grand celebration. As we get together on Yom Kippur, in fasting, in prayer, in deep devotion, Yom Kippur is a day that we tap in to our essential self on a very soulful level. We transcend the physical on Yom Kippur, and we go deeper and deeper into the essence of our soul. On Purim, we experience the same thing without going deeper and deeper into the soul, but it's about experiencing the divine within the physical, within the material. And aside from the Megillah, which really is about delving deep into the essence of what Purim is about, the story of Purim, the theme of Purim is discovering God within everyday life, and we do so with unity. We give gifts to our to friends, gifts of food. So we unite with friends. We unite with those who are in need, and we unite with community in a Seudas Purim, in a celebratory feast of Purim. Now, why? What is unique about this day? So the short version is they tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat. We know that's the very short version.
The usual story.
Yeah, but it's not. There's a saying in Yiddish: if someone is going to give a whole long, elaborate story, and doesn't just give the cliff notes, he gives the whole shebang, every detail. There's a saying for that, and that is the ganze Megillah. He's sharing the ganze Megillah. He's sharing the whole Megillah, the whole story, because the Megillah is very detailed. And I'll try to give you an encapsulated version of the details of this story. The story takes place shortly after the destruction of the first temple, which is in the 4th century BCE. The Jewish people have been led in chains by the Babylonians into exile. They find themselves in that entire region, Babylonian region, which is Iraq, Iran, that whole region. And then shortly after the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem, the Babylonians were conquered by the Persian Empire. So now we find ourselves sort of like a half a century later. We're in the Persian Empire, getting acclimated. This is a half a century later. So we're already acclimating ourselves to being in diaspora, being outside of Israel, being in a country that's not ours, being immigrants. We're acclimating ourselves. And we're doing so at a fairly good pace. Mordechai, who is the leader of the Jewish people, Mordechai finds himself in a leadership position, not only of the Jewish people, but the king of Persia at that time is Achashverosh, and he is one of the king's advisors. So we're not doing too bad for the Jewish people to now be advisors to the king. Not doing too bad. 3 years into his reign, the king is celebrating his vast empire. 3 years means I'm established. I've established the empire. And he rules over the entire civilized world at that time. He is ruling over 127 provinces, which spans from India to Ethiopia. And he is celebrating his entire kingdom. He's celebrating his rulership. He's celebrating his sovereignty. And he does so Achashverosh style. Achashverosh does things in a big way. And he has a feast, not for a week, not for a month. He does so for 6 months straight. A 6-month feast. The Megillah details the elaborate, extravagant feast that he has, invites everyone. Anyone can partake, anyone can enjoy, and it is just off the charts. Anyone can have anything they want. It's off the charts. Jews are invited also. Jews are invited. Achashverosh invites all the Jews, and Mordechai, being an advisor to the kings, he knows the inner workings of what's going on over here. He is celebrating he's celebrating his sovereignty in such an arrogant way that he puts on, since the Persian Empire inherits the Babylonian Empire at this point, they conquered the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonians who conquered the temple, they brought back many of the treasures of the temple, including the garments of the high priest that we learned about in the Torah. And here Achashverosh, celebrating his sovereignty and his conquest over mighty Jerusalem, even over the mighty temple. And remember, it's a pagan society, so he's celebrating the conquest over the gods as well. And so in his mind, he conquered the God of Israel. All the gods, including God himself. And he wears the garments of the high priest.
No little aleph for him.
So Mordechai recommends to the Jewish people, this is not a place to be. This is not right. Because it's not just paying homage to the king, which it would be appropriate to do so. But here it's at the expense of the dignity of Judaism, of God. So and aside from that, even though one can order kosher food, this entire environment is not for the Jewish people. So he recommends, don't go. The reason I'm sharing this is because this is an important part of the story of Purim. The Jewish community, in great part, does attend. And the reason why they attend is because in their own mind, they rationalize, we were invited by the king. Look, he's acknowledging us. We're not just some refugees. We're acknowledged as part of the Persian Empire. And if we pay our respects to the king, then we'll do off better. We'll be better off. We'll pay our respects to the king. We respect him. He respects us. We'll be better off. And this was against the advice of Mordechai. This is not your place to be, because it is at the expense of the dignity of God, of Judaism, because that's what he's celebrating, his conquest, complete conquest, even over the God of Israel. So, the advice of Mordechai is not to be there, and the Jewish people felt that, no, it's a matter of respect. We should be there because we are, after all, we are refugees, and here we are in a foreign country. We are to pay our respects. It is the right thing to do. They go against the advice of Mordechai. And they really enjoyed being accepted by Achashverosh. Now, this is important because the Talmud shares with us for what reason, what was the pivotal point of how did we get from being accepted by the king to eventually a decree of annihilation, God forbid, is because the Jewish people were honored to be at this feast. They felt an honor to be at this feast, and they enjoyed it immensely. In other words, they put their trust, important word, they put their trust in the king, at the expense of, this is really denigrating Judaism, denigrating the temple, denigrating God. Nevertheless, no, but we have to pay our respects to the king, and therefore we'll do it. Before we know it, things start going, the story starts unraveling. What goes on over here in the middle of this party? King Achashverosh calls his wife. He wants her to show off her beauty. Vashti turns to Achashverosh, "You're a drunkard. I'm not listening to you. You're in a drunken stupor. You drunk you are. I'm not getting involved in this. I'm not coming down. I'm not listening to you." He doesn't know what to do. His advisors say, "This is no good. This is no good." They told it this. First of all, at this point, the Talmud says Mordechai recuses himself. He's not involved in this. This is not something I should get involved in. But the other advisors of the king tell, led by Mehuman, who is also Haman, he tells Achashverosh, advises Achashverosh, this is not good for the kingdom. This is a bad precedent. The queen does not listen to the king. This is bad precedent. If the queen does not listen to the king, what's going to happen to the rest of the kingdom?
Wives will stop listening to their husbands.
Exactly. This is a
no good.
You're going to have a revolution. This is no good. This is no good, and you have to take a stand.
No.
What does he do? He's advised. He executes his wife. He executes the queen. He wakes up the next morning. What's happening? What happened? What's going on? He's reminded that he executed Vashti, and he doesn't know what to do. And so, what do? He's advised by his advisors. You should find a new queen. Okay?
There you go.
So how does he find a new queen? He's going to do it Achashverosh style. He holds a beauty contest.
Beauty contest.
A kingdom-wide beauty contest. Every young maiden it's a responsibility. You have to do your duty to the kingdom. You have to come to the king and present yourself before the king in his beauty contest. And his beauty contest is no small prize. It takes an entire year to prepare all of the contestants. The beauty, the spas, and the beauty treatments that they need in order to come to the king.
Right.
The 6 months of preparation for each, with each stage, it takes an entire year to prepare. The entire beauty contest, it takes 3 years after the 1 year preparation. So after 4 years, he can't find who to be with, who is going to be a beauty contest. Beauty contest, by the way, does not mean getting up in front of the judges and sharing a poem. It means spending a night with the king. And so he can't find Miss Right.
Good.
There's one woman who is forced to go to this beauty contest against her will, and that is the cousin of Mordechai, whose name is Hadassah. And against her will, she was taken, and so Mordechai advises her that since this is against your will, you're the only person who's going against her will. Everyone else is going willfully. We tried to hide you. We tried to do everything, and they found you. There must be some inner workings. First of all, you should hide your identity. And so she does. Her name now becomes Esther, which in Persian means star, but in Hebrew it means hidden. So that's the name she has, Esther, hidden. Her identity is hidden. And as we know, the end of the story, no one finds favor in the eyes of the king other than Esther. She is chosen as the queen. He tries to get from her identity. She refuses to give her identity. He just says, my name is Esther. Doesn't give a lot. She's very secretive about her background. The only thing she does share is that she is from royal background. And so he threatens her that if she doesn't disclose her identity, I'm going to have a second beauty contest, which he does. He has a second beauty contest, and no one holds a candle to Esther, and so she remains queen. During this period of time, Mordechai overhears a plot amongst one of the guards of the king to assassinate the king. Mordechai shares this news to Esther, knowing that Mordechai is an advisor to the king, and every single day he is in the courtyard of the king to to see what is happening and to see how the queen is doing. And since he overheard this plot, he shares with Esther, because since he knows that the king is somewhat suspicious about her, he wants her to find favor in the eyes of the king. So he shares this information with Esther. Instead of sharing this information directly with the king, he shares it with Esther, that Esther should pass along this message to the king, that there is an assassination plot, which indeed there was caught in time, foiled, plot is foiled, and the king is saved. The two guards are executed, and since Esther told this in the name of Mordechai, she does not say it in her own name, even though she could have benefited from that. She does say it in the name of Mordechai. She gives him the credit. It is recorded in the king's diary that Mordechai saves the king. That's it. That becomes also a very pivotal point that's recorded in the diary. Shortly afterwards, the Megillah tells us that one of the king's advisors, Haman, rises to power. And the king elevates him to viceroy of the kingdom. And everyone is to bow to Haman. That's the rule. Everyone should bow to Haman. Haman himself was, as many were in those days, it was prevalent in those days, idolaters. He would wear a miniature idol upon him. And everyone was commanded to bow to the king, bow to Haman rather. Mordechai, who is also at the gate of the king, he sees everyone bowing down. Mordechai refuses to bow down to Haman. I don't bow down to Haman.
Did he bow to the king?
No, it doesn't say anything about bowing to the king.
Because if he didn't bow to the king, they should not expect him to bow down to anyone else.
It doesn't say anything about bowing down to the king, but one thing is mentioned about Haman is that Haman wore an idolatrous symbol on him, and therefore bowing down to Haman would be prohibited. He did not bow down to Haman.
What was the symbol?
It was a pagan symbol. It was a little idol, a pagan idol. And so he did not bow down. He does not bow down to Haman. That was one of the reasons. There are various reasons, but he did not bow down to Haman. And Haman finds out that this is not just coincidence. This is not just a personal issue that Mordechai does not bow down to me. This is because of his Jewishness. Because of his Jewishness, he does not bow down to me, and therefore, this is, even though there were Jews who did bow down to him, this is some kind of plot. This is Mordechai. He represents the entire Jewish people. I'm going to have it in for the entire Jewish people. I have it in for them. And so, he comes up with a plot to destroy and annihilate the Jewish people. He casts lots, which is going to be the day that the Jewish people are going to be eliminated, God forbid, and it comes out to the 13th day of the month of Adar. So he comes to the king, presents the king with an idea. There's this people scattered throughout your kingdom, and they don't really respect the king as much as they respect their own God. They have their own set of laws too. And that is their real loyalty. They don't have much loyalty to the king as much as they have loyalty to their Jewishness. And therefore, it would be prudent upon the king to get rid of these people. And I don't want it to be any kind of financial loss to the king. So here's a huge sum of money. You take it instead of you shouldn't incur a loss. The king says, if that's what you advise me to do, I'll do it, and keep the money. It's yours. I don't need your money. And so he gave Haman his seal, and it was sealed into law, signed into law, that on the 13th day of the month of Adar, the entire Jewish people should be annihilated, God forbid. This is now the 13th year of his reign. We're now 12th year of his reign. We're now 9 years after that big banquet that he has. And now word goes throughout Shushan that there is this decree of the king against the Jewish people. Mordechai is still sitting at the palace gate, but now he's sitting at the palace gate with sackcloth. He's in a state of mourning. Esther finds out what's Mordechai was sitting at sackcloth in front of the palace gate. You can't do that. You're at the palace gate. So he sends message to Esther. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a decree against the Jewish people. So now is your time. Now is your time. You must go to the king. And you must now beseech the king on behalf of your people. He says, well, it's a little problem. I can't do that. No one can go to the king unannounced, uninvited rather. You can only go to the king if in the inner chambers of the king if you were invited to come in. And I wasn't invited to come in for 30 days already. So I don't know what's going on between me and him. And there's something happening, and he's going through something. It's one of those phases that he's going through, but doesn't look pretty. And anyone who enters the king uninvited, it's execution, unless the king extends his royal scepter. So I can't risk my life like this. So Mordechai sends back word. My dear Esther, don't think for a moment that you are going to be saved behind the throne. Number one, there will be a salvation for the Jewish people. One way or another, there'll be a salvation for the Jewish people. And who knows? If this is not the reason why you were chosen to be queen. This is your moment. This is your royal moment.
No pressure or anything.
This is your moment. He says, but you choose to do what you want. This is your moment. If you think you're going to be saved because you might get killed, one way or another, there's a decree against the Jewish people. So one way or another, there's a decree against every one of us. And you won't be saved just because you're behind the throne. But there will be a salvation with you or without you. But you have a chance now of fulfilling your destiny, of your purpose. I was wondering, why in the world were you chosen to be queen? This is your divine moment. I was wondering why. Why a nice Jewish girl would end up in the palace, would end up queen of Persia. This is not what you wanted. This is not what you signed up for. You had hoped not to be picked. In fact, when all the young maidens were getting a 12-month treatment, beauty treatments, you refused all the beauty treatments in the hope that you would not be chosen. And yet you were, despite all odds, knowing that there is something behind the scenes going on here. And this line that Mordechai says to her and conveys to her is that everyone has a purpose, and everything has a purpose. Despite the fact that God has His plan, we have a choice to make whether we are going to fulfill our purpose in that plan. If we don't fulfill our purpose in that plan, God's plan still will work out. Is that we have a purpose, and we have a choice to make, to stand up, to take part, and to fulfill our raison d'être. And here is what Esther responds. Just like Mordechai's line becomes one of the greatest lines. Esther's is even greater. Esther responds by sending a message to Mordechai to gather together the entire Jewish people and fast on my behalf for 3 days and 3 nights. I will also take part in this. I will also fast. And I will enter into the king's chamber, and kasher avadati avadati, whatever happens, happens. As they say in Yiddish, kesera sera. So think about what she's going to, as you're going to see, Esther has a brilliant plan that she will lay out. It's just sheer brilliance. Yet, the methodology in which she employs her plan, this is a lesson for life. So, think about it. She shares with Mordechai that she has a problem. She can't enter, she just can't enter the chamber and plea on behalf of the Jewish people, because you can't just do that. And the problem is, I haven't been summoned in 30 days. And anyone who goes unsummoned, they're executed. And here I am, I have no idea where I stand with the king, and not knowing what's going to happen. How can I just go in? And so she decides to go in with a brilliant plan. But before she goes in, she says, fast for 3 days and 3 nights, and I will also fast. Now, one thing that's certain, as she goes into the king, as she goes into Achashverosh, she has to gain favor, because that's what's on her mind. For 30 days she hasn't been summoned. Maybe he's upset. This is not like Achashverosh to not to not be with me in 30 days. It's unlike Achashverosh. So I have to gain favor. Fasting for 3 days does not do much for one's appeal, and not for one's beauty appeal. Yet she does that. And here is the lesson. Before she implements her plan, she reconnects with God. She recognizes that the implementation of any physical plan will only really have success. It's only an implementation. The real source of its success is God. My trust in God, not the other way around. That I do what I need to do physically, and then I put my trust in God. It's the other way around. We first have to have money in the bank to write out a check. It's not the other way around. You don't write out a check and then, oh no, I got to put some money in the bank. So first she puts her trust in God. She recognizes where the source is, and then she implements it. So she goes into the king. And the Megillah tells us that he sees the queen. Esther, what are you doing here? And he extends his royal scepter. Esther, what do you want? What have you come to me? He realizes she hasn't been summoned, and she came on her own. This must be pretty serious. What's on your mind? Up to half the kingdom I'll give you. What is it? What do you want? So she says to him, do me a favor. Can we have a private banquet tomorrow? You and me and Haman. A private banquet. Is that what you want? Okay. So let it be. And so, a royal call went out to Haman, inviting him to a very special royal banquet tomorrow with Esther and Esther and Achashverosh. Obviously, when he gets this message, he is elated to get this private invitation from the queen and the king to a private banquet. This is over the top. And he shares with his family, but you know what? All of this means nothing to me. Whenever I see this Mordechai guy, and he doesn't even acknowledge me. No acknowledgement. No nod of the head, no bow of the head, nothing, garnished. So they advise him, you know what? Prepare for him a gallows. And that will make you happy. That will bring happiness to you. Prepare for him a gallows, 50 cubits high, that you should once and for all get rid of him. And that will bring happiness to you. That's a good idea. Brilliant idea. Anyway, he's invited to this banquet, and the king says to Esther, "No." I don't know if he actually says "no," but in any case, I'm sure he must have said something like that. What's on your mind? What's the purpose of this banquet? What's on your mind? Up to half the kingdom I'll give you. So she says, you know what? Let's do this again tomorrow. Let's have an encore. You sure? Yep, encore tomorrow. All right, so let it be. And so, at this point now, the king's mind his wheels are turning. The Megillah shares with us that he can't fall asleep at night. He can't fall asleep. His wheels are turning. And if we go into, even though the Megillah doesn't actually spell it out, we already get the persona of Achashverosh. He is a very grandiose type of individual. He is someone who's focused on his own, his own sovereignty, and he's very paranoid. Very, very paranoid. And he can't fall asleep now. What's going on? What's on her mind? She doesn't feel comfortable to ask me. She has to, let's do it again tomorrow. What's going on? What is happening? Is something being plotted against me? He can't fall asleep. So he asks his advice. He asks his attendants, read for me from my memoirs. Again, you can see here, this is someone who's self-indulged. Read for me from my memoirs. And they get to the point where there was an assassination plot. There were two guards that tried to kill Achashverosh. And who saved me? It was Mordechai. Mordechai who saved me. I do have a friend. Someone who is loyal to me. Did I ever reward him? Did I ever repay him? Did I ever give him some kind of recognition? No, he did not. Gewalt. I have to reward this guy. He's one loyal person to me, and he was never rewarded. At that moment, Haman cannot get over this idea of preparing a gallows for Mordechai. So in the middle of the night, he goes to the palace and he knocks on the door. He gains access and he wants to see the king. And the king is up and says, who's there? It's Haman. Oh, my friend Haman, come on in. What brings you this time of night? What brings you? Wait. Before you tell me what's on your mind, I gotta ask you a question. If I were to bestow an honor upon the most amazing individual in the kingdom. What kind of honor should I bestow this person? What would you suggest? An appropriate honor for the most important person in my kingdom. Haman thinks to himself, of course, who is the king referring to? Moi! So if anyone is more self-indulgent than the king, it's Haman. So he says to the king should offer his crown, his robes. He should dress this person, have this person dressed in the royal garments, the royal crown, the royal robe, and on the royal horse, with the royal scepter, and be led through the streets. Someone should lead him through the streets and declare through the streets of the capital of Shushan, this is done to whom the king wants to honor. So Mordechai, Ahasuerus says, brilliant idea. Brilliant. Go get Mordechai. Get Mordechai. Yes, and he should dress me? No. Get Mordechai, and you should dress him with the royal crown, the royal scepter, the royal garments, the royal cloak, and on the royal horse. And you should be the one to lead him in the streets, and you should be the one to declare, this is what is done to whom the king wants to honor.
There you go.
Gewalt. This is where the whole story unravels. Everything goes topsy-turvy. You see how brilliant Esther was playing with his mind. But she puts her trust in God. And so he goes. Ahasuerus says, Maher, quick, immediately go. Don't waste any time. You go and get Mordechai. So first thing in the morning he gets Mordechai and he gets him ready to go. So the rumors are that someone is being led through the streets with someone leading him in the royal garb, in the royal etc., etc. So Haman's daughter, obviously in her mind, what's happening? Obviously it's Mordechai who's leading my father on the royal horse. So she gets a barrel full of dung, and she pours it over the guy who is leading the horse.
This is where? In the Megillah or
Medrash, the Medrash says this.
Oh, I was going to say it.
That's why there's a reference to it. Ovil v'chafui roish. That when Haman came now, now, as he immediately after this entire scenario, he's being led to the next royal feast. He didn't already have time to change. He's being led into this royal feast, and he goes into it. Ovel v'chafui roish. He has his head really hanging, and what's the proper translation? Chafui rosh is someone who is.
His head was all messed up?
Yeah, exactly. In any case, he's at this banquet. Whichever way you look at it, whether he came this way, didn't come this way, he comes into the banquet, and Ahasuerus, the king, is dying to hear. What is it, Esther? I'm willing to give you half my kingdom. What do you want? What's on your mind? So the queen says, there is someone who wants to kill me and my people. I was sold out together with my people. If we would be sold into slavery, that would have been sufficient. That would have been good. But we are destined to be killed. I, together with my people. Says, who wants to kill the queen? She points her finger to Haman, this guy right here. At this point, he doesn't know where to put himself. The king is furious. He goes out of the room, goes onto the balcony, and he sees the gallows that Haman had prepared. He sees gallows up there. He comes back in and he says, take this man, put him on the gallows. And that was the end of Haman. The Megillah continues that, and here is something very interesting. You think it's over by now. That's it. It's the decree would be rescinded about the Jewish people. It's not. She comes in and she asks the king about that decree. Can we have that decree rescinded? And the king says, I can't do anything about it, because anything which is sealed with the royal signet ring from the king cannot be rescinded. It's fait complete. It cannot be rescinded. Because the only thing I can do is, you can write up whatever you want, and I'm happy to seal it. I'm happy to sign it. So the best they can do is that they wrote up, Mordechai together with Esther wrote up a decree that the Jewish people have the right to defend themselves. The royal right to defend themselves. And that was sealed. On the 13th of Adar, the Jews stood up to defend themselves, and so they did. No Jew was harmed. But the Jews, they did say, here's an interesting thing. The original decree was that on the 13th of Adar, when every Jew was to be, God forbid, eliminated, all of their property could be taken. Ushlalam lavos.
Okay.
All of their property, you can loot, you can take. What does that remind you of?
Reminds me of the Nazis.
Holocaust.
There's a Holocaust survivor here in Wilmette who shared his story many times, and he says, as a child, the most painful memory that he had wasn't just that he was taken to the ghettos and is taken afterwards to the camp, but the day that he was taken to the ghetto, one of his best friends came to take his bicycle.
Really? This is what is in brain.
That was the most hurtful thing. I didn't. They had no idea what was going on. They knew they were just being relocated, and in their minds they're going to come back. No, one of his best friends came and took his bicycle.
That's something else.
That was the most traumatic memory that he had.
How old was he?
I don't know.
Was he 10 years old?
Any case,
10 years old.
The Ushlalam lavos, that anyone can take their property. The Megillah tells us regarding the Jews standing up to protect themselves in the presence of the army, Kol Chel Amo Medina, before the army and common folk who came to attack them. And yes, to protect themselves, they killed. They ended up killing 75,000, which tells you how many came to attack the Jewish people all over. And they did not touch any of their property. The Torah, Megillah makes it very clear. They did not touch any of their property. And so, this is to be written, Esther says, for all future generations, that this day should be celebrated. So the 13th day is the fast of Esther. That was the day that they were attacked, and they went to battle. They went to war against all those who wanted their annihilation. That's why the 13th of Adar is a fast day. Interestingly, the Rebbe explains the only reason why they call the fast of Esther, not because of the 3-day fast, but because since everyone was endangered, and they would have to be ready to protect themselves, they couldn't fast. The only person who was in a safe zone, who was able to fast on their behalf, was Esther. That's why it's called the fast of Esther. There was one person who did fast on behalf of the Jewish people, who had to stand up and protect themselves that day, it was Esther. So the next day, the 14th of Adar, is a day of celebration. That's Purim. The next day is Shushan Purim, because it's the capital. And Esther says, can we have one more day of standing up and protecting ourselves? Says yes. And therefore, the next day is the day of Purim for all capital cities that have what am I looking for?
Walls around.
That walled cities, the walled cities from ancient times, that they also celebrate on that day. So Jerusalem, Hebron, and so on, they celebrate on the next day, on the 15th day of Adar.
What about walled cities outside of Israel?
No, just other than Shushan. If you have Jews in Shushan, you can celebrate on the 15th day. In any case, so we celebrate on this day. It says, "Vayehudim hoysa ora v'simcha v'sasim v'ikar." On that day, there was light, joy, celebration, and that line is what we say every Saturday night as we go from Shabbat into the work week. When we find ourselves facing potential darkness, we remind ourselves of the line of the Megillah that just as we stand Saturday night with the Havdalah candle, there was light, there was joy and celebration. So it shall continue, so it shall be with us. This the reading of the Megillah has an incredible lesson for every one of us. The story of the Megillah is a miracle. But as we describe the entire story of Purim, not one event that took place was supernatural. It seems like this most amazing story. It can make a fabulous Hollywood film. It has all the parts. It has a brilliant plot. It has a villain. It has a hero. It has a king who is self-indulged, neurotic, all of that. Paranoia, everything that's in a story. It has everything to make this most brilliant story. Is it a miracle? And the answer is, here we have the greatest miracle. Because miracles like splitting of the sea is where God puts nature on pause. Here, God doesn't put nature on pause. While nature is running, God is orchestrating all the moving pieces, making sure that everything happens at the right time, at the right moment. God is working behind the scenes. God is working within nature. And that's a greater miracle. We think today, when anyone says there's no such thing as there's no atheist in a foxhole, we turn to God in heaven. There's God in heaven, but there's earth. Earth is and nature is something which is a different realm. No. God is God of heaven and earth. God is supernatural, and God is also within the natural, within the physical. That is why this is a greater miracle. On Yom Kippur, we spend a day in spirituality. We extend ourselves to a higher realm, to the realm of the heavens. We don't eat, we don't drink. We spend a day connecting with the soul. On Purim, similar to Yom Kippur, we also connect with God, but we connect with God within nature. What do kids do on Purim? They get dressed up. Even adults get dressed up. And that's not by chance. There's no such thing as by chance. That's what we learn from Purim. That's what Mordechai tells Esther. There's nothing by chance. You don't just happen to be in the palace. What do? We put on masks. We dress up. We take on a different persona when we get dressed up. This is a story of Purim. It's recognizing that we have to peel off the mask. We have to recognize who we truly are. We have to recognize what is really the mask over nature, over God, rather. Nature is that mask. We have to peel off that mask and recognize what is the true force behind everything in the physical. That's why Esther did what she did. In the very beginning of the story of Purim, we put our trust in Achashverosh, in the king. We were so honored to receive a royal invitation to his banquet, to his feast, even at the expense of Judaism. We put our trust in the mask. We put our trust in nature. And Esther taught us no. We put our trust in God. In God we trust. Yes, we have to now, we are in a natural world, we now have to implement it in a very physical, material way. But our trust is in God. There's a line in the Megillah that says, V'hayomim ho'ela nizkorim v'nasim. And those days should be remembered and fulfilled. And our sages tell us, and the Zohar says, as we remember these days, this is not by chance. The Baal Shem Tov points out that the story of the Megillah, the story that we just read, this story of Purim, is the story of the Jewish people throughout history. Whoever reads the story of Purim as it's a story that happened long ago, once upon a time in a faraway place, long time ago, they're missing the point. The story of Purim is a story of the Jewish people throughout history. And this year, certainly more than ever. And these days, v'hayomim ho'ela, and these days are remembered as we remember these days, the Zohar says. So shall they be fulfilled. As we celebrate this Purim more than any other year, may we have the fulfillment of this Purim. That that to the Jewish people there was light, there was joy, there was celebration and honor. So let it be with us. That all the enemies of Israel, all the enemies of the Jewish people, all the Hamans, take away the ends, all you're left with is Hamas. Take the Hamas and turn it into hummus.
Oh.
That's it. Let it be a victory, a true victory of right and goodness and light over all the forces of darkness. Keinti Elonu, may it be a celebration of Purim like no other. Together in Yerushalayim with Mordechai and Esther, together celebrating Purim with Mashiach.